Okay, right now, practically every single person in your life is probably just losing their mind over summer, right? They're talking about beach trips, they're counting down the days, posting those golden hour sunset pics. But if you're sitting there wondering if you're genuinely broken inside because the thought of going outside sounds way less like a vacation and more like an absolute punishment, well, you're in exactly the right place. In today's explainer, we're diving into the psychological and biological evidence from our source material to validate exactly why you might completely despise the summer season, and, spoiler alert, why it absolutely does not mean there's something wrong with you.
Our source material captures this whole vibe perfectly with this quote: "Summer is the only season that comes preloaded with a personality." I mean, think about it. You don't get handed a mandatory checklist of fun in November, do you? Nobody's looking at you sideways in February asking, "Hey, why aren't you more into this?" But when summer shows up, man, it's completely different. Suddenly, there's this unspoken cultural rule that your mood, your wardrobe, your whole social calendar, the whole shebang needs to realign around the sun. It's almost like the sun is your new boss. You don't hate fun, you just kind of hate this particular brand of fun that comes with this intense social obligation to act thrilled about sweat and UV damage.
So if you're sitting there watching everyone count down the days to these chaotic beach trips, and you're wondering if you have some sort of deep-seated personality defect because you literally recoil from it, the answer is a resounding, scientifically backed no. Disliking a season that has such a massive amount of cultural capital doesn't mean you're a killjoy. Actually, scratch that. It actually points to some very specific, observable differences in how your brain and body interact with your environment. You aren't broken. You're just operating on a totally different biological frequency than the people who somehow thrive in 90-degree weather.
This different biological frequency points directly to psychologist Elaine Aron's concept of the highly sensitive person. Researchers who study sensory processing have been building a really strong case for this. For someone with this trait, their nervous system is quite literally wired to pick up more noise, more heat, and more stimulation. It processes environmental input way more deeply than the average brain. Because of this, summer isn't just a season, it's a sensory assault that literally never clocks out. That radiating, relentless heat with absolutely nowhere to hide, it can push an already stimulated nervous system into a state that feels less like standard discomfort and a whole lot more like a low-grade dread.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is the sheer scale of this trait. This heightened sensitivity, it applies to roughly 20% of the population. Just to put that into perspective, that's 1 in 5 people. So if you feel this way, you are not being dramatic. Not at all. Your nervous system is just very loudly telling you something that other people's systems are quietly ignoring. For that 20%, pretending to love the blistering heat and blinding light is basically fighting a losing battle against their own physiological wiring.
So, how exactly does this biological baseline translate into intense social pressure? Well, summer does this totally unique thing where everyone's schedule clears out at the exact same time, which creates this massive ambient pressure to fill it. The group chats wake up. That whole "we should all do something" energy arrives in full force. And if you're someone who finds that constant availability quietly exhausting rather than exciting, you know it creates a rapid downward spiral. And it's nearly impossible to articulate this feeling without sounding like you're complaining about having friends, which, let's be honest, is basically the most socially unacceptable complaint a person can possibly have.
All of this leads directly into an incredibly isolating feeling, because you're not just tired, you're also forced to feel bad about being tired. Honestly, the guilt is almost worse than the exhaustion itself. You catch yourself thinking, man, I should want this. And when you don't, that thought curdles into something darker. As the source so beautifully puts it, it becomes the kind of quiet self-questioning that follows you into August like a second shadow. You just carry that guilt around all season long, essentially performing a mild tolerance for weather and activities that you just don't actually feel.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point here is that hating summer isn't just a mood issue or some quirky social preference. It's literal biochemistry. Let's talk about sleep for a second, because this genuinely surprises a lot of people. The longer daylight hours of summer don't just affect your mood in some metaphorical way, they actually mess with your melatonin production. See, light actively suppresses melatonin. Therefore, more daylight hours mean more melatonin suppression, which leads straight to falling asleep way later.
And the hard data absolutely backs this up. Research tracking people across seasons shows that sleep duration in summer is meaningfully shorter compared to winter. On average, people get 16 minutes less sleep per night in the summer. Now, at first glance, 16 minutes sounds pretty small, right? But think about how that heavily compounds over time. Weeks and weeks of slightly shortened sleep, that is absolutely not nothing when it comes to your cognitive function. Now, if you're already sensitive to sleep disruption, like if you get irritable, anxious, or emotionally dysregulated when you haven't slept properly, then this is a massive revelation. Summer isn't just hot and loud, it's actively keeping you chronically, subtly sleep-deprived for 3 consecutive months. Literally from June all the way through August. You might have thought you were just in this mysterious bad mood all summer, but the reality is you were just quietly exhausted on a biological level.
On top of all that biology, seasons carry this deep emotional residue. Our source points out that the brain is just not great at separating then from now when environmental cues are identical. Things like the smell of sunscreen, the specific quality of that late afternoon light, or even just the sound of a lawnmower in the distance, they act as environmental time machines. They trigger your nervous system, transporting you right back to previous stressful summers. Maybe a time when school structure vanished or your house was tense from the heat. And this happens whether you consent to the trip or not. That vague, nameless resistance you feel in June, it might just be your body remembering.
And that brings us to the changing of the seasons. When September finally rolls around and you feel that huge wave of relief wash over you, a relief so big is almost embarrassing, pay close attention to it. Because that relief is pure data. It is real, actionable information telling you exactly what your body and your mind actually need to feel okay and regulated. It's the contrast proving that your struggle was 100% real and that your environment deeply, deeply affects you.
This brings us to a massive, incredibly empowering reframe from the research. Preferring cooler, darker, quieter environments doesn't make you a hermit. It actually often correlates with something called thinking introversion. This is a specific facet of introversion defined by a really deep engagement with one's inner life and imagination. It's strongly associated with a cultivated depth of self-awareness. Basically, the people most comfortable inside with their thoughts have built a really rich internal world. This isn't just some consolation prize for hating the beach, It's a profound cognitive and emotional asset.
So the way you move through summer, the retreating, the carefully rationed social energy, the boundaries you set, it is not a failure at all. It is self-knowledge. Knowing what costs you energy and actively choosing to protect yourself from it is a highly advanced skill. In fact, it's a skill that a huge chunk of the population spends years and years in therapy actively trying to figure out, and you already know how to do it. You just mistakenly thought that diverging from the majority meant you were doing something wrong. You definitely aren't. You've just been paying attention to your own needs.
Now, for those of you quietly dealing with the exact side effects we've explored today, a racing brain, ruined sleep, or just a total lack of focus, our source offers a highly practical framework. They've outlined a 7-day guide, which is linked in their description to help you take some real, actionable steps. We're talking everything from clearing your mental backlog and rebalancing your dopamine to finally fixing that sleep schedule and rebuilding your focus.
So, to wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this. What does summer actually feel like for you? I highly encourage you to drop an answer in the comments, because for all the highlight reels and golden hour posts out there, I promise you, someone else is likely scrolling in a slightly air-conditioned room, desperately hoping they aren't the only one who feels this exact same way. Let's build that community and keep this conversation going. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.